Yeah. Welcome back, everyone, to today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Professor Andy McNally at the Colorado State University, doing some organic chemistry over there. Before we get started, we're talking a little bit beforehand. Big match ahead Sunday. Arguably the biggest rivalry in the world. Honestly, it's really up there with El Clasico and Der Klassiker, Liverpool versus Manchester United. But if I were a United fan right now, I would be dreading this because United are just in shambles right now.
It's not good, is it?
It is not good right now. And Liverpool, while they have some defensive liabilities right now, they're flying high. Their attack is just probably the best in the league. So how are you feeling headed into tomorrow?
Yeah, I know this game relatively well, so I never want to get too confident. Although I am quietly confident for this one. Going back to this rivalry, it's something I always try and tell people in the US that, what have you got that maybe matches it here? Things like Yankees, Red Sox. And,
yeah.
But
Eagles,
even then, it's not,
Cowboys.
It's not the same. And
it's not.
It's so crazy that the two cities, I think if you plot like city center to city center, it's 35 miles apart. Like that's nothing.
Yeah.
And the people, the accent is completely different. And there is some hatred in this rivalry. So
there is.
More recently, it's either been them being really good and us kind of chipping away at them, and now it seems to have flipped the other way. So there isn't I guess like a ton riding on this, but it's still going to be vociferous there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be a boiling atmosphere there at Anfield. Yeah. The good thing is, because last year you guys won 7-0 at Anfield, which is just unheard of. Yeah. I'm sure it was a great day for Liverpool. Absolutely dreadful day for United fans. But like you said, though, I mean, while United has just been really bad recently, you just never know, honestly, going into a big rivalry.
You never know in this game.
You just never know.
Football's a low-scoring game, and if things can happen. And
yeah, it's one of the beautiful aspects of the sport, but also, every fan dreads it. It's like you can dominate possession for 80 minutes, and the other team will score on a counterattack, and you lose 1-0. So it's just one of those, it's just like that's just what it is. But
exactly, this is why I've never said in any game like this that we're definitely going to go there and just march all over them. I actually think it'll be pretty cagey until late on, and I think our subs will do it.
Yeah.
So that's my prediction.
There you go.
So I guess we'll see how that one works out. But yeah, that'll be cool. It's and then as I was mentioning before, I'm going back to the UK next week, and I'll be at the Liverpool Arsenal game on the 23rd.
Oh wow! Okay,
so
that'll be a very fun game.
That's also going to be a big one. So.
And
hats off to what Tottenham are doing this year. Little lucky against Liverpool, I think. Right? We all know what happened there, but
a disallowed goal that should have went ahead. Listen, I mean, we were very fortunate that day. You guys had a goal disallowed that should have been given. I don't know what else really is to say about that.
No.
Curtis Jones probably. I think textbook probably is a red. Bit unfortunate though, because that did change the game. When it was 11v11, it was actually really, really fun to watch. But then as soon as you guys went down to 10, it was kind of
Yeah,
it's a bit unfortunate. But honestly, I dread going to Anfield though, so you guys will probably bash us in that game. But I appreciate it. If we reach Champions League spots, that's kind of all I've really wanted. I'm just excited to see exciting football again, honestly. Like, I can't. 4 years of Mourinho and Conte just
recently.
So it's also just refreshing to see a manager who can really articulate and like he's actually he's just likable. Like Ange is just he's nothing. He's never said anything that I disagreed with. Like if
I've been really impressed with him. He's real, right? He seems like when he talks to the media and stuff like that, you really feel like you're hearing from him as a person and stuff like that, and he's honest. I think that's winning over a lot of people outside of London as well. So, and yeah, it's what he's done to transform the way the team's playing in such a short time is pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
It was always maybe going to start to sort of peter down a little bit.
Of course.
But I think top four is totally doable. I think Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, top three, and then the fourth place is up for grabs, right? I mean, at the moment, it looks like Tottenham or Villa. So
yeah, I agree. I think
things like that.
Yeah. So it's an exciting time to be a Spurs fan again, honestly. Just, I
think we've maybe lost all of the chemistry audience here. They're like, what on earth are these two?
I've had multiple guests now. I mean, with Dave, with Scott Gilbertson, who's a professor here at Houston. He's also a Liverpool fan. He is,
I've met Scott before. Yeah, we've talked about that.
Like, I'll talk about football for hours. Like, I don't really, we can do whatever we want, no, but I guess, well, we can transition over to the chemistry though. But, perhaps if I ever catch you at a conference, this will be late nights at the bar where we're talking
or maybe I don't
football.
know. Often at conferences, I'm trying to find like a bar that's going to show Premier League games.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think the earliest I remember one time being in San Francisco and getting somewhere at 5 a.m. right?
I would love that
at an ACS conference, finding a bar and watching Liverpool versus Everton. I remember that. So
that's really fun.
I'm committed to these early mornings. So
same.
The West Coast. Colorado's a little tough.
I was gonna say, if you have the early kickoff, that's got to be like a 5 a.m., 6 a.m. type deal.
Yep.
But
hey,
the things you do for your club,
exactly. It's like it's one of those things that where I grew up, you're born into it, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that looking back, it's like an amazing gift that you get from your family. You don't really realize it. My dad taking me to games and things like that, and then getting the season ticket. And in Liverpool, you're either Liverpool or Everton. We're the same people, and there's a big rivalry there. But that's a big way of life there, right? It's it really is part of the fabric, and it's good that we've been doing well recently because. Going back to the Man United thing, when I was kind of started really going to the games, it's when Liverpool had reached their peak and then tailed down. So, I had that big period where we've been knocked off our perch, right? And then watching them going back up has been brilliant. So I think they're just in that zone now, and it's tough, right? And this is why managers like Alex Ferguson are real legends, and you can't just put in another one, and so this is it. You think, we'll get a Mourinho or we'll get someone, and it doesn't always work out. And then you see someone like an Ange Postecoglou come out of nowhere, and it's like, wow. So that's
just so refreshing,
Yeah.
But I guess so we can start transitioning over to the chemistry a little bit. So maybe a little bit about yourself. Obviously, Liverpool fan. Now, did you grow up in? I know you went to the University of Cambridge for your undergrad, but did you? I assume you kind of grew up around the Liverpool area then, or
grew up in a place called Bootle, which is about it's about 2.5 miles outside Liverpool city centre. So, sort of humble upbringings there. It's where Jamie Carragher's from as well. Actually.
Oh, really?
So, so grew up there. Sort of. One of those backgrounds, like first person to go to university and stuff, and then went to Cambridge for undergrad, which was just an amazing experience. Yep. Again, you look back and just realize what an education that you got there, and the way things are set up. Actually, again, this is something that people in the US might not realize, is that people specialize heavily at university in the UK. So, you often go and just pick one subject. Like you do another foundational courses as well. But Cambridge was good because it has a natural sciences courses where you can kind of pick 4 sciences. And I went there wanting to do chemistry and then kind of stuck with it. But to be honest, a lot of the time when I was there, particularly early on, it was a little bit out of my depth, if I don't mind saying. The mathematical level of some of the people there was just off the scale, and that wasn't really my forte. But then organic chemistry just really clicked with me, and it was sort of getting into a research group there, and then staying on to do grad school PhD there. And particularly formative experience was I joined Matt Gaunt's group as one of the first group of PhD students. And
Oh wow.
Anyone who's kind of been through that, you don't have a clue at the start, right? But everything that you're doing is new. It's like you're helping to build all of the chemistry off the ground. And that also suited me. It was just, we were just throwing ideas around left, right, and center. So trying ideas and then mostly failing was kind of the norm, right? It's a difficult thing to do that, but that was a really big thing, right? Having that experience actually, which just sort of continued. And it's definitely my sort of favorite part of the job now. Not the failure part, but the ideas part.
Yeah, it's just kind of circling back a little bit to kind of getting into organic chemistry. Now, like through, let's say, junior high and high school, was chemistry something that kind of always seemed attractive to you, or ahead of that?
Yeah. And I don't know, I was thinking about that the other day. I don't really know why. I just thought it was cool. And, at high school, I was lucky to have some really, really good chemistry teachers. If they ever hear this, Mr. Hagen and Mr. Daly, and I think they maybe, if they look back, they maybe saw something in me that I was doing well and stuff like that. And they helped to push me. And, even in high school, we did, as part of the curriculum, a bit of organic chemistry, which I don't think you typically do in stateside.
I certainly don't.
So, it's like everyone comes in and students start doing the OChem classes in undergrad, but you got a little bit of a leg up. This is, again, where the two educational systems are a little different. America's broader, and then eventually you find your way in. But it was one of those things. I just thought chemistry was super cool. I think it was. I envisioned it as a sort of great career. I never at that point thought about being a research group leader or professor.
Of course, I don't think anyone does.
No,
and they're lying if they say they do. Okay.
No, way too early. I think the first time I really started to think, maybe that was sort of midway through grad school, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, that is one of the things that everyone will point back to, that having these kind of like the teachers that really create a spark in you and stuff like that. And it kind of went from there. And then going to undergrad, like the chemistry education at Cambridge is just phenomenal.
Right?
And it's
stellar.
Quite classic. It's quite classic in a way, which I'm really glad of. It's because basically you're always just going back to your fundamentals, and they're there from the curriculum there. So really fortunate to have that.
I was going to say, it's interesting now to see Professor Matthew Gaunt's lab, really blow up. I have acquaintances that I know that are, my age in his group now. So it's just kind of, you're saying he was one of his first PhD students. So it's really cool to see it kind of grow. And to arguably it's got to be one of the biggest labs in the UK. No, it's just like, at least like recognizable anyways, like for sure. Even worldwide,
absolutely.
Honestly.
And I remember I started a little bit early. I got there in the summer, and I remember we went into actually this lab called Lab 180, and the building at Cambridge is it's a somewhat old building, and they've done a lot of really nice renovations recently. But this lab, oh my god, that was all wooden. It was where people like, I think some of the kind of luminaries from that department did their PhDs there. I think, did Ian Fleming do his PhD in there? And the bench tops, you have like kind of glass and stuff like that on them, or they're marbles or something. These are just, people had taken brown kind of duct tape and just like wrapped it round. So one of the first things that we had to do was just scrape all of this stuff off. So it really was like down in the dirt, let's get this lab going. And
that's awesome.
It was really good, that lab at the start, because it had 3 starting research groups in it. So really a lot of young energy in there. It was brilliant. So
yeah, that's awesome. It's probably really cool to look back on that now. So with you're at the University of Cambridge now. Did you go in as kind of a chemistry undergrad, but also too, how did you get the opportunity to do research with Professor Ian Paterson?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning before, you go in doing it's the natural sciences tripos. It's one of these kind of sort of archaic names coming out here, where you start doing basically 4 sciences. One of them is usually a math course, and then specialize in about midway through. And yeah, about midway through, I really started to click with organic chemistry, and Ian Paterson was teaching some of the courses there. So you for the one of the things that's really great as well, you do a 4-year undergraduate course, and in the final year you join a lab for what's called part 3. And one of the things there is that the curriculum, there's a lot of total synthesis kind of emphasis to a certain degree, and a lot of at the time kind of aldol methodology and things like that. So I that was one of the things that really got me into chemistry. Was like, it's one of the first reactions that you might look at and really start to think in 3 dimensions. And so I was kind of fascinated by the sort of control of that, and then applied to work in Ian's lab, and then was fortunate enough to join that team, who were a fantastic bunch. And it was one of the things that made me want to stay on for grad school, because we all love the science and stuff like that, but on top of that, like working in a team where you go in every day, and it's like it's fun, right? And the people there are just great, and there's the social aspect to it afterwards. And I just thought, this is like it's sort of a match made in heaven, right? It's like being part of a team, doing something you really, really love to do, and it was a load of fun at the same time. So that was like, right. I just, at that time, it was like, I want to continue doing this, right? It was kind of obviously you're thinking a little bit further ahead, but I didn't really consider sort of anything else. Like a lot of people at Cambridge, there's a lot of movement down to London. It's close by, and then people often go and join sort of banks and consultancy firms and things like that. And so even within the sciences as well. But I just thought, if I get the opportunity to sort of stay and keep doing this, I want to do it. And yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I'm originally from Philadelphia, but moving down here to Houston, and I'm very fortunate enough where I joined a group where, I guess we're Brad Caro's like first group here at Houston. So like 5 of us joined, and like it's kind of similar. It's like we're all really serious about our work, but also the banter that goes on in the lab, and it's like it's not all serious 100% of the time. We have great laughs and we hang out. So it's like I understand that completely. Where like it's really attractable if you find the right research group. If you have lab mates that are sociable and outgoing, it can be a very fun experience.
And it's something I tell my students now. Most of the time as a PI, you're kind of on your own in your office. And to be honest, I they know this. I go in and bug the hell out of them each day just because I want to get out of here, right? It's just like I get in here and it's like just me. You're often sitting with your own thoughts and like, oh, this email's coming in. I've got to deal with something. So I tell students, I cherish this while you've got it, and it's like that environment. You might have something similar when you get a job in industry, but it's going to be a different vibe, right? If people go into the industry. So it's just it's so much fun, and I don't know. I wasn't someone who was brilliant in the lab, but I miss that a lot.
Yeah, I hear you.
I really do. So I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the experience. Just soaking in all the moments, because I'll tell you what. I have 2.5 years done, so about halfway through.
Oh, right.
Like, well, it flies by quickly. So
yeah, it's getting real at this point, right?
I was gonna say I just finished my PhD, the candidacy exam, and so it's like it's like a huge weight off the shoulder. It's like but now it's like, well, now I'm a PhD candidate, so now I have to actually I have to be a little bit more pressure, which I like though. By the way, I like it because I like what I do.
Yeah,
but it's just funny.
Yeah, there is a transition after the candidacy exam. It's because there's a big build up to it as well for the students. You know, you're expecting monsters to be jumping out the walls and all kinds of stuff, and it's the one thing is like as soon as it's done, it's like, okay, now what? It's like, oh right, it's like,
yeah,
and you probably get the talk to a certain degree. It's like, okay, great, just this is the big push now and all that kind of stuff. So
it's like you prove that you can do it. So it's like now you have to actually do it.
Yeah.
So, and I definitely will. Like I have nothing. It's just it's just funny how it works out. So I look forward to these next 2 years. So
good.
But yeah, so you at the University of Cambridge. I guess transition to grad school, like you mentioned, it was kind of an easy go. Were there no thoughts about moving, like going somewhere else, or was it really just?
Well, that's another kind of interesting part of the story. It is more common in the UK to stay where you are, which I guess you can argue has got good and bad points. It's certainly not that common in the US, although it seems to be creeping in a little bit more.
Also, in the U.S., I don't know why it has kind of a negative connotation, like staying on to do your grad. I don't know. The U.S., I always get that impression from people. I don't really know why, but
well, I think part of it is just it's been like that for a while. So it's sort of a cultural thing. I do hear people saying it's like the argument for it. You want to learn stuff at one place, and then the kind of transition to another, like the mobility thing, helps. And if everyone's doing it, it's sort of circulating around people and the net benefit of that, all of that kind of stuff. It's I actually think that will start to change. We're already seeing it a little bit more here at CSU. I did undergrad at Cambridge. I loved living in Cambridge. I thought it was great. It's a top place. So I didn't the push to move out of there wasn't super good, and then Matt came along, and I remember we sort of talked about what chemistry we would do, and Matt was obviously very. It's funny to say this word now, but obviously he was very precocious at that time, and I got really good advice from other people, and it was just like, this is the thing I got to do, and
right.
So yeah, in some ways, and the other thing that people like that's very different to the US, and it is, that came out of a sort of 30-minute conversation. Then you pick a research group. They don't really have visit weekends and things like that in the UK. It's changing a bit with these doctoral training centers, but it's like, so in some ways I think I did look at one other place, but you don't do that kind of merry-go-round. People do.
Like rotations.
Crazy. Like some people do like 6 visit weekends and all of that kind of stuff. So, that's kind of how that happened. Yeah. Didn't really want to move, to be honest. So
I hear that. So when I applied to graduate schools, like it was the year after COVID, so no one was doing visitations, and so
you did the whole online thing.
I met a few professors online. I'd spoken to like Zoom calls, a few professors, but it was funny though because like I'm very easygoing. So when I was applying for graduate schools, I literally picked the schools I would like to, where the cities are that I would like to live in. Like moving to Houston, I didn't know anything about the Houston chemistry department. I just moved to Houston because I was like, I like the city of Houston.
Yep.
Turns out there's actually really good chemistry here. So I got really lucky in that sense. But I'm just kind of going with the flow here. But I don't know, like sometimes picking like a graduate school as an advisor, I found it very easy. Like it was just like, it just seemed right. It just felt right. So like you should go to roll with it. I know people, a lot of people may have different opinions on that, especially but for me, it was easy. It was very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate for that. And
you mean picking the school?
The school and advisor, yeah, both for me. Well, I got lucky with the school, but for sure.
Sure, and trust me, we have the same thing in terms of like people want to move to Colorado for obvious kind of Colorado reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the whole picking a lab and things like that, I do tell students it's a gut feeling decision in the end.
Yeah.
There's sort of some sort of analysis that you can do. But it's you could write your list of pros and cons and look at that. It's never going to come down to that. You're just going to feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often at the last minute, where you've really got to make a decision. So, and often your gut decision is
usually the right one.
Is a good one, right? And so yeah, you definitely picked a good school and a great group. So good for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. So you're in graduate school now. You're with Professor Matthew Gaunt, and you're working on organocatalysis, right? So 2,3 Wittig rearrangements. If you want to tell us a little about your graduate school, what you were working on, but also kind of your training and that whole experience.
Yeah,
from a chemistry point of view.
Yeah. So as I was saying before, it started in Matt's group as one of the first students. And so, the group grew pretty rapidly, but, entering in as one of those students and kind of getting chemistry off the ground was, we didn't know any different than let's just try a load of stuff, right? And try and do things that we thought were cool and try things, watch them fail. And then eventually, things started to kind of land, right? And, this was in that period where organocatalysis is really just was blowing up like huge, right. And going through that, maybe the younger people have experienced this more recently with like photoredox catalysis, a similar thing. And yeah, we just hit on this one reaction that I worked on for most of my time in graduate school. Tried to make it asymmetric, failed, and basically have been scared off of asymmetric catalysis ever since. Right? It's just it's so hard. But so the working on some cool chemistry was good, but really the thing I look back on was having that experience of being in a very nascent group and having the mindset, and this all came from Matt, was just we were just always talking about ideas, always writing things down, and what about this, what about that, and it's so crazy that we still do it now. Like it's just continued for God, how long? This is getting towards 20 years. It's like this is because, to be honest, that was the most fun part of it, right? It was throwing ideas around and it really shaped me going forward, because that's the bit that I really latched onto as the thing I most enjoyed. And so, that's kind of what we do in our group now. We're always trying to get a blend of that thing in. So incredibly formative, like that experience.
Yeah. I was going to say that's a very, very, very unique experience where you're talking with, I guess a very new professor at the time, right? Gaunt. And you're only a first year graduate student, so it's like you don't really have that much under your belt either. So it's just like you guys are just throwing stuff at the wall. That's incredibly unique. And like, how many students get to be able to do that? Like where, it's like you and your PI are just doing like just trying different things, right? I don't.
No, and I look at this now that I've got an established group, and we're actually trying to do things to kind of always make sure that that's sort of part of a group meeting thing and stuff like that. We gotta get that back going after Christmas, actually. But in some ways, it's a great way to learn chemistry. This actually, and when you think about learning chemistry and learning the field, the obvious thing is like you go and read the papers, you go and read the books and stuff like that. Now, in some ways, like that, you can do that, and you need to do it, but it's a little passive. Like when you're doing trying to like make your own ideas, you've got more of an investment into it, and they, like an attachment. And so you're like, oh, I think I've got this great idea. I'll go and research all these papers. You've got just like a different emphasis to learn stuff because you've got skin in the game to try and flesh out your idea and stuff like that. And so this is like, I just think it's a phenomenal way to learn things, because it puts like it sort of gets your emotions going into it rather than just like, oh God, here's 20 papers I've got to go and read. It's kind of like being like in the game instead of just sort of sitting on the sidelines, right? You're really playing it, right? When you're trying to come up with stuff like that, because I think that's one of the the beauties of what we do, and something that I think is underestimated, is that we can try things pretty quickly. Right? If you've got ideas, you can go in the lab, and sometimes you can try it even on the same day. We've got people in this department who do chemistry where you need to build an instrument, and it's going to take a year or two to even try an idea. And I love the fact that we can just shoot from the hip. Mm-hmm. Right? It's such an underestimated thing that we don't talk enough about, that we can do stuff like that. And so that's one of the things that I got out of this, and it's kind of like a sneaky way to learn chemistry, and a much more fun way to do it, rather than me finger wagging at the students. Oh, you've got to read Jacks all the time and stuff like that. So I'm trying to actually pivot the educational part in my group towards doing it that way, because you get a much better response out of it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, and the students kind of definitely feel empowered by it. The last thing any student wants, and you could definitely test this, is no one wants a finger wagging professor to say, "Oh, this wouldn't work," or whatever. Like no one wants to hear that. Now, of course, there are some times when you need to think about the chemistry a little bit, like what are we actually trying here?
Yeah.
But I always kind of admired that about my organic professors, where it's I remember taking organic reactions and synthesis, and everyone's got that project where you got to do a total synthesis, and that's kind of your chance to really just be creative and just try things and read literature. And as a first year graduate student, that's an extremely informative process. But I always admired how I'd bring something to Professor Jeremy May, and he'd be like, "Oh, this actually wouldn't work for this reason." I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, now let me go back and rethink that." So I think that's really unique to organic chemistry, where you can have an idea. One, you could actually just go try it, but also if it doesn't work, you can articulate and think about why that actually wouldn't work in practice. And that's something that's unique to organic chemistry. So
yeah, absolutely. And again, it's if you do have something, and you eventually, if you go to someone like Jeremy, or people come to me and I have to say I don't think it'll work for that reason, you've just got a valuable piece of information that you've learned, and it'll probably stick, because you're probably pretty excited about getting your idea to work. And then the negatives can you feel them more than the positives, all that kind of stuff. So but that's the thing, where doing this requires a certain amount of bravery as well, because I remember these things. It's okay, the first time you've got to route plan a total synthesis, and you sit and put something together, and you nervously kind of hand this over, and it's like putting a bit of yourself out there. And but I think the more you get used to this and accepting that it's actually a skill, and you'll fail a lot at the start, but you're just trying to narrow in the narrow in your intuition about how to do this. That's and if you stick with it, you get it does become intuitive. And I think when you start to think about chemistry like that, then I think you're really hitting higher levels of it. So I don't know. I think that type of stuff is super fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you're putting together the puzzle pieces, and it is really exciting to know that you can get to a point where you can think about these organic molecules, like these building blocks, like these puzzle pieces. You can throw things together. And so I think that's really exciting. I wish it was kind of taught more like that in the undergrads, but it's tough to accommodate for a lot of medical students who are never going to use organic chemistry, probably ever. But
right, yes,
it's been unfortunate.
Tell me about it. Yeah,
that's a conversation for a different day, or even right now. I don't know, but I
get it. You when you get to the more advanced undergrad classes, you can bring that in. So
absolutely,
you can get there. It's just when you're catering for the masses, it's hard to be that flexible and
absolutely
have a structure and all that kind of stuff. So
So post Professor Gaunt, you had gone to do a postdoc with Professor Dave MacMillan. At least your first one, anyways. Okay, so doing a postdoc, tell me a little bit about this. Was that kind of an easy decision? You mentioned earlier that you might have thought about becoming a professor at this time. It's kind of unclear, or you were just kind of doing it just to postdoc. You can kind of move wherever you want. kind of,
Yeah.
I mean, assuming you get the funding, but you can kind of go wherever you want. But also, there's no pressure to do the science. Like you just do the science for fun. So, tell me a little about kind of how you got
Yeah.
into the postdoc position.
Yeah, that in some ways, particularly back then. So this is, I went to Dave's group in 2007. That was the track. Even if you wanted to go industry and you were from the UK, undergraduate, graduate, and then kind of big name professor in the US was, you had those things on your CV. Then you were kind of looking good. I always wanted to move to the US. I was sort of fascinated by the place. We do get a lot of influence coming over in the UK, and I always really wanted to move there. And then obviously that's that part of it, but the science part as well. And sort of 2007, David obviously really emerged clearly at that point. And there's other things that happen with that. I remember Dave came to give a talk in 2005 at Cambridge, and it's one of those things. You see Dave give a talk, and you walk out kicking yourself, thinking, "Why didn't I think of all of this?" And you're kind of rooting for him at the same time. It's like, I got to work for this guy, right? It's
Right.
just stuff like that. And you could see someone who's really distinctly pushing the field forward. And, I thought I thought I had the right mindset as well, related to what we were talking about before, where that's a place that you could go and really push new ideas and things like that. Still steering towards methods. I think at this point, I wasn't super hot on going somewhere and doing like a kind of big natural product synthesis or something like that. That really wasn't kind of what I wanted to do. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, but it just seemed like an all-round good fit, right? And so, Dave's a Scot and I'm from Liverpool in the UK. It's like sort of without even meeting each other, I guess there's like a tacit connection of some in some form. And another one of these things, that a decision where, like working for Matt, I didn't necessarily know exactly what I was doing, and then doing a postdoc is a bit of a sort of crystal ball decision. But picking those two advisors, wow, I think I've made some pretty good choices there. And so that's how it came about. And unfortunately, Dave was accepting me into his lab. So
awesome. And so I think at that time he was at Princeton.
He was when I applied, he was at Caltech, and then the move happened sort of during the announcement of the move was happening during that process. So originally I thought I was going to go to Caltech and then switch into Princeton, which I was totally okay with.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a huge switch though between Caltech in Pasadena versus Princeton, New Jersey.
They're kind of similar, right? But
similar.
I don't know. I remember like wanting to go to California and thinking that would be cool, but I also really liked the fact that Princeton was, it's on the East Coast and it's really close to New York. So I'm like, oh, that'll be a fun part of it. I guess I didn't really, you don't really understand at the time, but they are very different places.
They are, and no, I mean, I always
especially in December. So
right. I listen. I love New Jersey. Growing up in the East Coast, Northeast, love New Jersey. It is just a funny place where you just have a top notch university, just in the middle of New Jersey. Like it's just kind of funny to me.
Just a little bubble there.
Yeah,
and obviously it's a. I don't know if you've been to you've been through Princeton. It's not a big place.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's a small town, honestly. It's like really unique experience. Like it's not like the only people that live there are people that go to the school, honestly. Like there's really nothing like it's a very unique experience.
That was one thing I wouldn't say concerned about, but obviously that's a bit different to California, Pasadena and stuff like that. But oh god, you're kind of you're immersed in what you're doing, and then the people in Dave's group, the team that incredible, right? We had so much fun. So, that part, no problem with that.
Right. Yeah. They're brilliant minds there at Princeton, but also, I know a few people there. I talked to Paul Chiric now, and it just seems like a great time. Like it's just like seems like it's very fun there. It's like all power to you.
It was amazing.
Yeah, but so now you're at Princeton, pursuing your postdoc or pursuing. Is that the right pursuing a postdoc? I guess I don't know. It's like a full time job. But what were you working on there? And was kind of like,
yeah. So the main thing I worked on was this very unusual project with a very snappy title called "Accelerated Serendipity." Right, and this was this was an idea that Dave had, which was, and Dave. I've seen so much of this in my own career as well. Is the influence of serendipity in what we do, if you really are honest about things, is just absolutely massive.
Yeah.
And so, I guess like Dave really wanted to harness it and see if you could somewhat steer this thing or get control of it. And so, I started this project, which was the aim was, can you come up with a reaction sort of deliberately by serendipity? And I know that's a contradiction by the definition of the word, but it's easier to explain it like that. And it was timed with, like Princeton has this Merck Center for Catalysis, and they've got a lot of this high throughput screening facilities were coming in. And so the idea is, can you sort of essentially take advantage of statistics by, if you run enough reactions, you're likely to find something unusual, right? The more times you try, the more likely it is that a serendipitous event is going to happen. And yeah, that was the project, which was, oh God, what a roller coaster that was. And, even sort of managing how to do that was kind of nuts.
Walk me through that a little bit, because obviously, your background's in organic synthesis and reactions, and now you're kind of transitioning into, statistics and high throughput screening, which, trust me, is not an easy transition. And it's high throughput screening is kind of interesting because, like, on the one, like, it's easy once you, I guess, like anything in life, but like it's easy once you master it, but it's not an easy thing to master. It's like there's so many variables. It's incredibly complicated and can be scary at first, but kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, there's sort of two aspects of this. One was exactly what you're talking about, is getting good at those techniques. And it's actually what you're saying. It's why students think this is a great idea to do it. And then you dip your toe in and try it. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go do some high throughput screen. And you realize like, something in this process goes wrong. And it's like, they'll kind of like get scared and back out. Fortunately, in Dave's group, there was a guy called Jay Conrad, who was basically, as part of his role as a postdoc, was managing this Merck Center for Catalysis. So, he was the expert on the robotic systems and things like that, and he essentially trained me how to do it. So, I owe Jay a lot for doing that. So that really helped, and it took some time to get used to it and coming up with a decent analysis system and things like that. So that we kind of got straightened out relatively quickly, but it's one of those things. If you think of the idea of this project, okay, come up with a reaction somehow. Like, where would you start? And to be honest, what felt like the obvious place to start was, okay, well, what things have got a lot of sort of inherent reactivity in them that can transform organic molecules. So in some ways, it makes sense to just go at the transition metals, right, and ligands and all of those kind of things. And that's what we did, right, which totally seems sensible. And I think it in hindsight, I still think that was probably the right place to start, knowing what we knew. But what we kept finding is, whenever we found something, there was always something closely related in the literature. And if you do think about it from this sort of high-level view, it makes sense, right? Because people have done a lot of stuff with transition metal catalysis. It's pretty... All right, I'm going to be careful what I say here. It's like, I don't want to say it's well mapped out territory, but there's a lot of mapping done, right? There's still plenty of room. So that was the issue, was that we were finding things, but it was like, well, it's a bit like X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that helped with this was, and it was actually around a Christmas time where I inadvertently, for reasons I won't go into, got stuck in Princeton over Christmas. Involves losing a passport, but anyway, we'll park that. And it was, I think we were starting to think, well, maybe this isn't the right way to do it. And at that time, the photoredox stuff was really sort of taken off in the lab. And I guess we kind of thought, well, you've got these photoredox catalysts. They can also do a lot of different things, shuffling electrons around between organic substrates. Why don't we? But also the territory there's a lot less mapping done.
Yeah.
So as soon as we started to try photoredox with this stuff, we started to get stuff immediately, and it happened really, really quick.
Oh wow.
So what we found was this reaction where you take N-aryl aliphatic amines and you couple them with cyanobenzenes at the alpha carbon.
Okay.
So it's an arylation alpha to an amine mediated by a photoredox catalyst, right? And so that was the reaction that we found, which is, and it's interesting this as well, because that's a very distinct reaction at the time for what was going on in Dave's group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was photoredox stuff, but where that started was with organocatalysis. So,
right.
A lot of stuff with kind of transient catalytically generated enamines and so on. And so, we found this kind of unusual and distinct reaction. And, when that was what I did, I then went and developed that. But, there's a couple of things with that which really influenced my own career. One, or one thing which I think was more than just the reaction itself is it kind of, it's a coupling reaction. It's like that, and then you stitch them together in a pretty distinct way to make a useful product. And, you can see the way Dave's group is doing a lot of all this metallophotoredox stuff. So I think it sort of got the mindset going for that. And then the other thing that happened with that is, you can imagine the subgroups doing this serendipity project. Go in this week, nothing. Go in this week, got this crap. Go in this week. It was pretty brutal. And there was only a couple of subgroups where, you could really tell the impact and that it had, but many others that didn't. And well, there was obviously getting the hit and things like that. But one of the things that also happened with that, as well as just cyanoarenes, we could couple cyanopyridines. And I remember trying it and trying the reaction, and the reaction worked as well. I'm like, okay, great. But I could see it really, Dave was really excited about it. And, Dave obviously has done and does a lot of consulting, and, coupling a heterocycle on with that, I was like, that's really resonated with him. And you can see how that's kind of continued into my own career. It was just like a moment like that where I'm like, oh, right, why are we ignoring all this heterocyclic chemistry and this thing? So, from that one project, there's like a lot that certainly personally I got from it. And, I still think about this stuff today. I'm still trying to engineer serendipity into the way we do things as well. It's one of those things that what's happened sort of since, and I'll stop in a second, but it isn't as sort of like doing it as randomly as we were trying to do it. But if we're sort of honest, when we look at how things have happened within projects, it's like we didn't understand that or that or that, and it just sort of emerged. So yeah, that was that project in a nutshell.
Yeah, I appreciate. I definitely.
Not sure I'd want to do it again.
Sure. I completely understand that. It's great, great experience, but I understand the feeling of, I don't really want to do that again though. I think that's really, really interesting. What would you, so let me ask you this though. So for, let's say, startup labs that don't have access to, Princeton's high throughput screening, obviously, and they have staff they have robots, staff that handle all this stuff. Let's say even, like yourself now, if you kind of want to engineer serendipity and let's say a startup lab, what are some approaches that you think you could take from that? Because obviously, you you learned a lot from the high throughput screening, but like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you took away from that where it's like, yeah, actually, I mean, this equipment is really great, but actually if you want to engineer serendipity and across all, labs, like here's actually what we need to do.
I think that's, in some ways, when we were doing the high throughput stuff there, it wasn't super sophisticated. Well, one of the things that we realized was, for this serendipity thing, you don't necessarily need absolutely massive numbers. So a lot of the time we would run, a couple of 96 well plates of distinct reactions is plenty, rather than you having to run a million or something like that. So, things like 96 well plates, even ones now where you can kind of get lights feeding into them, I think are totally affordable for startup labs. And to be honest, a lot of the time we either used the robot system that we had, but we often just assembled a lot of the things in the plates through Eppendorf pipettes, multi-channel Eppendorf pipettes, which, again, totally affordable. And then analysis by a GC with an auto sampler. Now, we had a nice one with a really nice auto sampler that you could essentially just put the 96 well plates into. If a lab's starting out, like I got one of those when I started out at CSU. It turns out that we went into all of these polar compounds and we've barely used. We've got a really nice GCMS, but it doesn't really work very well for things like heterocycles. So it's totally doable. Depending on what you want to do, right? Now, some of this really data-intensive, data-rich stuff, you might need more throughput than that. And then I know Matt's group are actually doing a lot of this now. There's these
Matt Sigmund, and
out there, which I don't think are Armin and obviously all doing this stuff. I don't think it's wildly off limits for a lot of labs, actually. Now, I definitely find some. I've sort of lost track with this stuff. So that there are people more qualified than me. But even if you want to get going on stuff like that, 96 well plates are totally fine.
Yeah,
right? You can get a lot out of that.
Yeah, 96 well plates and just a GC to analyze. I think with some, if you're a new professor and starting up with that startup fund, a GCMS, some 96 well plates, and some Eppendorf, multi-channel pipettes, and you're kind of ready to go, I think, honestly.
You can do an awful lot with that, right?
A few eager graduate students and, hey, ready to go. I think you're that's more than halfway totally there. It.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that. That was, very, very interesting then. So coming towards the end of your first postdoc, but then you kind of went back to University of Cambridge for a second postdoc with Matthew Gaunt again. Now, and this time, but you were doing kind of palladium catalyzed reactions. So I don't know if you want to tell me a little bit about, going back to Cambridge and a second postdoc, which is sometimes unique. I don't know. I don't really know many people that do secondary postdocs, but
it's more, it's another UK thing, and I guess the plan was to go back into the UK system, and it's, I don't know if it's changed now, but you sort of need to do your time there. So people doing multiple postdocs was pretty common. The other thing is I got one of these things called a Marie Curie International Outgoing Fellowship.
Yep.
Which is very clever, actually, because it's got funding for you to go outside of Europe. We're in Europe at the time, but then it's also got a return phase as well. So it's good. It pulls you back into the system. So I had to go back, and I was very, very happy to go back. And it was crazy, like going from Matt's group when I started, which was very small. We were starting it up, and then going back, and it just it's much bigger and things like that. And so a different experience, and actually one thing that was incredibly useful then was getting a sort of a capacity to kind of manage people in the lab, and because it was big and stuff like that, and that prepared me a hell of a lot for becoming an independent PI and stuff like that. And then this palladium chemistry was there, which again a somewhat unusual serendipitous observation that you can form these 4-membered ring palladacycles, and we sort of transform that into a way to functionalize aliphatic amines, right? Which you'd think you can maybe do. Like an amine is a directing group. You see a lot of CH activation with directing groups, and amines would probably be one of the ones that you'd go for first, but they never really worked because you get these bisamine complexes and you get beta hydride elimination and things like that. And we found with this sort of set of somewhat specific amines that were really hindered around nitrogen, that it couldn't do those things. And you could get, four-membered ring palladacycle formation, which again you wouldn't expect because it's strange and things like, but it's happening at room temperature, all of this kind of stuff. And then you can see what Matt's group did with that. They took those initial systems and then they've really made it broadened it to actually work on, more fundamental amine systems rather than the somewhat hindered ones. So that's kind of how things went with that. Yeah,
that's really cool. At this point, though, were you thinking about becoming a professor? Like, is this like really like kind of like when did you kind of decide? Yeah, I actually really want to do that.
I guess like the idea was I was thinking about it before I did postdoc, and I said, okay, well, I think going to do a postdoc is a sort of good. It's a good stress test on that because it could be just you just liked where you were and you thought, okay, well, academia sounds great, but it's going to be different when you transition into the job. You might go to a different place. So I thought, okay, if I go and do a postdoc and I still want to do this, then I'll do it. And then, pretty quickly when I got to Dave's group, I was like, yeah, everyone still seems on track for that. So, I think I'd confirmed my decision sort of relatively early into my time in Dave's group.
Yeah, excellent.
But I think it was wise to just like say, okay, well, what happens if you change environments? You're like, oh no, actually, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. So I guess I definitely want to get to your chemistry now. We're in. We'll finally get to your chemistry.
Oh wow,
that's how it goes. No, it's all right. We're having a lot of fun here. But yeah, so after your second postdoc, you went right to CSU, right? I think.
Yep.
And now you are an associate professor. So congratulations on securing the tenure. I think I actually don't really know how professorships work, but in any case, you got the upgrade from assistant to associate professor.
Yeah, that usually comes. That's the point where it happens as well.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But you have a really, unique, I would say, research group there where, I actually presented my second year seminar talk around metaselective functionalization of aromatic compounds, and part of your research made it to my talk at Houston.
Oh, that's cool. So, that's really cool, actually.
It was quite a joy to read about, but also to share as well, because it's in hindsight, it's kind of really simple, honestly. I don't really, so halogenation of the metaposition of pyridines using zincy amines. Can you take me a little bit through? I mean, we talked a lot about serendipity. But, how'd you come across this? I mean, on paper, like I said, it's so simple, but I guess difficult to, like, no one's really kind of put it together, I guess, until
I'll give a bit more context in terms of, when I started, we actually didn't immediately start with the heterocycle stuff. It wasn't part of my proposals and things like that. It was just always in the back of my mind that, it's just self-evident that these structures, pyridines, diazines, related heterocycles, are super important in medchem. Right. And medchem is maybe one of the biggest venues that we're trying to pitch chemistry that we develop at, because they're the biggest set of practicing chemists on the planet, right? And so if you want to get your chemistry used, they're a good target audience. And it just baffled me that why, you look at the heterocyclic chemistry out there that people actually use. And I think a good indication of this is, so Phil Barron's got, I always forget what this book's called. It's like the Medicinal Chemist's Handbook.
Yeah.
It's all of these reactions, or if you look in a heterocyclic chemistry textbook, it's all old stuff. Now, there's good points to that old stuff typically works that well. And I think Phil in his book he's maybe just avoided putting a load of the new stuff in, including his own. But still, it's like, there were just so many unanswered problems that were clear to see, like halogenation of pyridines. You're sort of taught that at undergrad that it basically doesn't work. You have to sort of boil this stuff in sulfuric acid and bromine and stuff like that. It's like, well, right. And then everyone knows.
It sounds very pleasant.
Everyone knows why halogenation is important, right? It's, you get a carbon halogen bond, you can kind of do whatever you want, so So we started actually with this phosphorus chemistry, but I'll kind of jump forward to the phosphorus chemistry got us at the 4 position, which was, there's very few methods to get anything sort of as a generic functional handle at that site. So, we kind of went at that first. But we
maybe, well, hang on, just maybe we should start with that actually then, because that was, I don't know if it's important for kind of the continuity of it, but yeah, I'll let you decide. I don't know. I'll let you decide, honestly.
Well, the one good part to say about that was, the sort of discovery of it, because it wasn't just the sort of chemistry side of it. It was, I've done a lot of catalysis in my training, and then we hit on these reactions that, and there was some precedent for this that we actually sort of didn't know about. We just started to try, and we knew the 4 position was very hard to get at on pyridines. And, the pyridines are important. It's like a framework where you've got these vectors, and you need to hit each one to do medchem, right? And do it specifically. So there's really nothing that you can't halogenate at the 4 unless you do all this multiple step stuff. Yeah. It's like, right, you just get one reaction. Everyone is sort of going to use this stuff, and we sort of hit on this phosphorus chemistry that got us there. And the interesting part of it was when we first started looking at it, I had this sort of innate visceral reaction, like, what am I doing? This is stoichiometric phosphorus chemistry, and it's heterocyclic chemistry, which everyone thinks boring, right? Mm-hmm. And I was actually fortunate, going back to my undergraduate days, to do both a medicinal chemistry class and a heterocyclic chemistry class taught by Stuart Warren, right, of the Claydon Warren Greaves textbook. Yep. So I knew about this stuff just by training, and a lot of people don't. But it's got a bit of a reputation of being this kind of, and a lot of it's just like condensation chemistry that you just boil stuff up. So we started to do this phosphorus chemistry, and I was like, oh, I don't know, am I making a mistake here? This, like, in the era of sort of catalysis and going back to doing stoichiometric reactions. But I think we realized, like, the power of the transformation. And the other thing that sort of was a bit of a crystal ball thing at that point, it was like, well, these phosphonium ions are kind of unusual. It's like, well, you can look at it and think of it as a pseudo halide, but I'm coming from Matt's group in particular, where doing main group chemistry with iodine, hypervalent iodine, where you can get this thing to kind of behave like a bit like a metal. It was more just like, what, I reckon there'll be some interesting stuff here. And that's one of these things where, and I love it because things start from such loose ideas, and then this is one of the things that I try and impress on my students. It's like, people don't realize everyone thinks science and chemistry is pre-planning. I've got to think this out, and you're completely ignoring the emergence. The phenomenon of emergence is massive, right? It's just stuff starts to happen when you start to do it, and you don't know that in advance. And so basically this phosphorus stuff went from, I don't know if we should really do this. It's like, how's this going to be received, to, oh my God, let's just pile all in, right? And so it, as well as the transformations, getting a range of different bond functionalizations at that point, we found all of this interest in phosphorus ligand coupling, where things are like actually adding to phosphorus, and then you're getting things that look like reductive elimination. And we got some papers on that where, and it also struck me, it's one of the things I realized about cross coupling is the whole thing is pinned up on a small number of elementary steps. Right. A cross coupling cycle, depending on what you do, has got like 3 or 4 of them in, and you just like sort of get a variation on one of them with a different way of doing it. It can open up all of these things. So phosphorus ligand coupling is a bit like reductive elimination, but different as well. So we worked on this phosphorus chemistry, and then getting us into, so that was 4 selective, and then going back to the zincy stuff. One of the big things with that, there's a couple of things with that, but one of them was COVID. So it was like, we got to shut down. Let's just like use this time to kind of brainstorm, just trying to get something positive out of that goddamn mess, right? But we used the time to sort of brainstorm some of this, and and the interesting thing about this, so this story actually goes back to the Princeton days. I don't know how many people know about this zincy reaction.
Yeah, I didn't know about it when I was first year graduate student. I was like looking at it for the first time. I never even saw this before. This zincy reaction.
I don't think people teach it, but I became first aware of it when Chris van der Waal came through Princeton, and I think I don't know if it was his tenure talk or he was given a seminar on all of his zincy chemistry to make things like strychnine and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, that just stuck in my head. Like Chris's talk was one of the big inspirations for this, and I think it shows how valuable his work it is, because I was obviously thinking about heterocycles, and then someone walks in and goes, right, you can rip up a pyridine and then open it up and then do things with it. And I had this idea for even relatively near at the start of my career. I just sort of never thought it would work. That, yeah, well, we've got the phosphorus stuff to get at 4. What about using the zincy reaction to open it up and then react with electrophiles and then close it up again? And the interesting thing is we tried this reaction about 5 years ago, maybe more, and it worked. And we just kind of ignored it because all the phosphorus stuff was happening. A guy called Ryan Daluski ran it in my group. And we actually even saw that there was a report on it. The way that we've been doing things, I'll get to this in a second, is the way we activate pyridines. But it's just one of those things that, sometimes you see something and we didn't recognize the potential, but we returned to it in COVID, kind of went back and started to see, holy smokes, like we can open all of these different pyridines using this. And one of the most important reaction in my lab has been triflic anhydride and pyridine reacting together, which is not a new reaction. People have known this for years, but I think what people didn't recognize is how broad of I'm going to steal a term from Dave here, of an activation mode it is, right? What that allows you to do is it lowers the energy barriers to add into the pyridine ring to often below 10, right? Which is tiny, right? So the phosphorus add in there is like 6 kcal per mole, but it also allows you to add things like other nucleophiles like amines. Now, in some ways, that's a reaction that shouldn't work, because if you want to take a secondary amine and add a triflyl group to it, triflylate it, then you would often take triflic anhydride and a pyridine, and then the amine will attack the sulfur portion of the N-triflyl pyridinium salt, right? It's kind of like Lewis base activation. Yep. But if you do those reactions in certain solvents at minus 78, it's like turning the whole thing upside down, and the amine starts to add to the ring. That's why this all works. It's a particular reaction regime. And so, yeah, we just started to see, taking pyridines that are embedded in drugs and splitting the thing open, ripping this open into this zincy imine. I think we knew then, it was like, whoa, this is a big sort of part of the battle here. Now, the big thing, and maybe one of the reasons why we kind of ignored it was, or not ignored it, we didn't capitalize on it earlier on, was even once you've opened it up, we knew we wanted to halogenate because we knew about that problem. But if you look at those zincy amine chains, the 3 and the 5 position are delta negative. And we just looked at them and said, there is absolutely no way that we can see why that's going to give you a selective result. Like, why are you going to halogenate over the 3 over the 5 or vice versa? And you're going to get polyhalogenation and all that kind of stuff. Now, that was another one of these things where, that you've just got to get in there and try it. And I remember the results coming in. A student in my lab, Jeff Levy, who, he ran the iodination and it was done in like a minute at room temperature and was completely selective for one position. And he's kind of coming in and saying, is this okay? Like, yeah, it's pretty good. And so, that was another big key to this. And then the final thing with that was, can you sequence this whole thing together, open it up, functionalize it, zip it all together, kind of in one go? Because even though it's sort of 3 reactions, if all you're having to do is take a reaction vessel and just add stuff,
right?
Like, kind of who cares, right? In a day, you can kind of have a halogenated pyridine. So that's, and it all just sort of came together from that. But yeah, it's another one of those things that when COVID happened, we started doing the brainstorming thing. Let's try a bunch of ideas, and a lot of them didn't work. And we were like, well, what about that amine addition stuff that we were looking at? And we just went back to it, and that's how it came about.
Yeah, that's incredible. One question I have though is, yeah, because in the past 10 years or so ish is like all we hear about is like organic catalysis and catalysis. And so, I'm sure you had some critics say, well, this is kind of stoichiometric. It's just like, it's just an interesting transformation though. It's like, there's no other really way to do it. Like, I'm sure, yeah, obviously like, you would love to do this catalytically, but I mean,
Yep.
it's almost kind of like in some ways, back to the 1960s, 70s, where it's like, it's stoichiometric, but we were just trying some reactions and it really worked. So I don't know, like,
I,
you know,
it's I'd say on the whole, it's been quite refreshing how positive people have been about this.
mm,
And I think it just shows that, going back to earlier, I remember when I was a grad student and it was like everything was organocatalysis and it was like that was the important thing. And then, maybe that runs its course to a same to some extent. And then, lots of stuff on photoredox and all of that kind of thing. And we can get caught up in, I'm not going to call it like in trends, right? I think is a fair way to see it. But, I think fundamentally deep down, we all like simple, powerful transformations. Like in some ways it's, you've got to recognize that. And the other thing that we knew is like, if this is for MegChem, then they just want the molecules, right? They're not necessarily, if it goes to bigger scale and process get involved, okay, catalysis is important and it's got to transition there. But if you're a meg chemist and you need a few MIGs of material and you can do this in one step rather than going back 5 steps to do a step earlier on to get the analog, you're just going to do it, or maybe you can't even do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think on the whole, it's like there's always like a reviewer that will bring that stuff, blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff. But no, I've been really pleased that people have taken to it and have recognized that. And I think it's just a perspective on looking at stuff. I think if you look at the kind of editing movements at the moment, it's a similar thing there. It's just viewing reactions in a different way, and a lot of those are stoichiometric processes and stuff like that. And so this is another thing that I think is kind of fascinating, how your whole opinion on something can just kind of flip depending on the angle that you're looking at it from. So yeah, we'd love to make all of these things catalytic and things like that. But, there's reactions out there like amide bond formation that are used pretty widely that there's no sort of general catalytic approach.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most satisfying things for me is when I've been to companies and they're like, yeah, we're using your chemistry. It's like, that is just blows my mind, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really going back to this. Where does this stuff all come from? It's chalkboards,
Yeah.
right? And stuff like that. So seeing that kind of make its way through has been absolutely incredibly fulfilling and things like that. And it's great for when the students hear this. It's like I've just come back from somewhere and they're using your reaction. It's like, wow.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be an incredible feeling. And, good on you guys. Because, I mean, it's just, at the end of the day, too, it's just a cool transformation. What I do find interesting is that it's chemistry from like the 1960s that kind of just reemerged again. Like chemistry. Was it earlier than that? Really? Okay.
The Zinke reaction was, the first report is 1904. Right? This
that
is
early? Wow. Okay.
How they even knew what they were characterizing at that point is absolutely mind blowing.
That is crazy.
That's it. I don't know. In some ways, I don't know what to think of it. Right? But it's the way we kind of think about progress in the field. We're always thinking it has to be this big new thing, like to push things forward. It's got to be something fun. But it maybe if you look at it instead of we need to find. It's kind of like finding new orchards, right, with a load of low-hanging fruit, right? And that can be from something pretty simple and pretty old. So that 1904, it's absolutely insane. So yeah, that's the other person who deserves credit for that is Mr. Zinke, right? Who kind of did this.
Chemistry is also unique where the trends are always changing. Like, I mean, right now it's photoredox catalysis, organocatalysis, but I mean, it's really always changing though. And it's like the opinion of the grand community, is changing, and so it is unique in that sense. But there's a joke. Um, Professor Olaf Douglas here, where it's like, if you want the best ideas, just go look at a German or Russian textbook from like the 1930s, and like you'll find like the next idea. And the funny thing is, there is some truth, that there's just truth to that. It's like everything's probably been done before, and it's just kind of repackaging it,
Well, yeah,
reimagining it. You know?
I do wonder that as well. It's like, was there a big bonanza of everyone finding the reactivity, and now we are sort of piecing this thing together? I don't think it's quite that, but yeah, a lot of this stuff is, you can always go back in any field and find a few shoots, right? But again, I think, and this was something I learned from both Matt and Dave, it's the sort of the problem solving a mindset. It's like, what's the problem out there? How are you going to solve it? It's like, yeah, it's difficult to get out of nowhere the solution. You need a few clues, and that this is where the sort of traditional Zinke approach just won't cut it for the work that we've just done, because it's the way you activate the pyridine is just not going to. It's too harsh conditions, and substrate tolerance isn't good, and things like that. So we needed a bit of luck that we were working with triflic anhydride. Again, another incredibly, like, pyridine and triflic anhydride, N-triflualpyridinium, very well known. But it's like all this other stuff has come along with it. And we got a bunch of papers that are about to come out where you'll just see transformations. You're like, right, okay, you can do that. It's just kind of mixing some things together. Yeah.
I saw I'm seeing now, like, working on like making like hetero piperidines. I always forget. I think it is piperidines. But also, you're
saturated.
Yep, the unsaturated variants, and you're also looking at nitrogen 15 variations too, which is extremely useful. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about those as well.
Yeah. The piperidine story is that came down to, I guess, like, sort of connections. There was this thing kind of going around on chemistry Twitter about, how do industry and academia sort of collaborate and communicate, or collaborate better, and what facilitates collaboration. So people are like, it's communication. And when we started to find this Zinke chemistry, and it can do a lot of different things, like, as well as halogenation, you can imagine a ton of electrophiles that you can pick up. And then I'll get into maybe some of these other things that are not just straightforward functionalization. But, I reached out to LC Campo at Merck and was like, we've got this new stuff. Do you want to hear about it? And so we had a Zoom call one day, and I got my group to sort of present the work. And I think he really liked it, and kind of sent the slides around Merck. And then it was picked up by Matt Mattis and Eric Phillips as like, okay, you've got this platform. What do we want to do together with it that, kind of benefits sort of both of us and pools the ideas? And, between us, we came up with the idea of, well, if you recyclize, instead of with ammonia, if you recyclize with amines and anilines, then you're going to get through to pyridinium salts. And then if you get through to pyridinium salts, that's the gateway via hydrogenation, and then like nucleophile addition, electrophile capture into piperidines. So, then it was like, this is a really, really good match, because, we've kind of converged on this idea. We can take advantages of the high throughput screening facilities at Merck, all of that type of capability, as well as developing it as an academic project with a goal towards sort of medicinal chemistry discovery. And the first paper should be in the journal in a few days or something like that. But it's on Chem Archive, and I think there's more stuff coming as well.
Yeah,
on
that's
this,
exciting.
What we can see, but again, it's like that. This is not a new idea, like pyridine to pyridinium to piperidine. Now, there's a phenomenon here which I think is really important to acknowledge. Have you heard of the Lindy effect?
Mm-mm.
And I got this from reading. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Nassim Taleb. He he writes books on things like anti-fragile, the black swan effect, and things like that. And the Lindy effect is something he talks about. And the idea is that it's the reverse of aging. Okay, so as you get, the idea is that the longer an idea or a thing has been around, the more likely it is to stay around. Okay, so that's the opposite of aging, right? The older we get, the more likely we are to die. So one of the ways, again, getting into this idea of just how do we think about making advances in chemistry without necessarily having like some big technological breakthrough, is you can look at things that are in existence, like that pathway to get to piperidines, and realize that that's a solid idea, right? You can get pyridines, you can turn them into pyridiniums, and then you can reduce them. But and everyone knows that you can do that. But the issue is that the pyridine to pyridinium transformation is not great, right? The way that you can currently do it. And so what we've basically done is sort of like an upgrade to that strategy. Like the strategy is great. It's very well known, but it's got a huge flaw in it. So this is one of the things that I like to do, is to look at things from that perspective. It's like, well, what's a thing that's really in existence that could do with a massive upgrade? And in some ways, you can look at the photoredox cross-coupling stuff and say, well, cross-coupling is very well established, but the kind of sp3 ones are not so great. And so, you can just, it's still cross-coupling. And so that's another way to kind of look at this stuff. It's like even the whole zinky opening thing, that's not a new concept. But if you can take something like that and upgrade it, it can become massively more powerful.
Right.
So that's another way that we like to look at things as well.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because especially nowadays, like access to in the pharmaceutical industry, like at the end of the day, like they're the ones that kind of are using all this chemistry. So it's like, what are the problems that kind of they're facing?
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to find a lot of this stuff. It's like, like you mentioned too, at the end of the day, like the med chemists, they just want the molecule. And so it's kind of up to academia in some sense to kind of bridge that gap. And so there's plenty of discovery there, I think. So
that's why it's been great to work with this team that we've got at Merck. And, you can just, you can sense things that they gravitate towards and others not. And it's like, well, they're actually doing this. Right. And so that's the really important thing, again, making the N-aryl piperidines, like a big thing is just variation of the N substituent. And then, so you see in this paper that we can do like a lot. And so one of the advantages, you just hit the Merck compound library and pull out all of these anilines, right? And heteroaryl anilines and things like that. So, well, yeah, that's how that came about. And the communication thing, it's like, I think this is what we were talking about before we started the podcast, is like these forums, the sort of public square to discuss this thing a bit more. I think we need more of that. So, yeah. Kudos to you for getting this out there and things like that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. We were talking briefly beforehand. I think, like if you look on podcasts nowadays, Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple, YouTube, like there really isn't anything for chemistry. Honest to God, like you could type in you type in famous professor's name and maybe a seminar will come up, but there's not like, it's not like you could sit down and listen to like some of the top chemists in the world. And that's unlike other areas of STEM, right? So physicists are always on the Joe Rogan Experience, or they have their own podcast. They're talking about physics. Same with mathematicians. And biology is probably the easiest, right? Neurobiology, biology, health. Like those are the easiest. Now, they're really easy to market because everyone cares about their health and fitness, but there's just nothing for chemistry. And if someone wants to direct me to another source of where people are talking about chemistry in an open platform, I'd love to see it, but really haven't found one yet.
I only know your one and the Farm to Table podcast. I think that's it. I'm
unfamiliar with that one. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, that's it's LC at Merck, and I think Danny are involved in this. And I don't know. I think we've got plenty of things to brag about. As a community, for the effects of reactions have had on the planet and things like that. And I think a really good one for that is to listen to Dave MacMillan's Nobel Prize talk.
Yeah, I've watched that. It's very
the way
good.
he introduced that, it's like in typical Dave fashion, right? It's like, and I don't know whether I don't know if we're shy about it. I don't know if it requires certain people in the field to go out and do it. But I agree with you. Like the things that I've seen, and like from physics, I've seen more from physics actually on podcasts and stuff like that. And they're talking about what's actually happened, and they also have some things to brag about, certainly. But I think reaching the public for this stuff, we need to do that, and particularly for things like organic synthesis, we need to convince them. It's like, yeah, this is where the drugs come from, and
Right.
a big part of it, and all of this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think we'll certainly, like I told you before, try and get Dave on and see if he can do that. His big thing is communication, as I told you, and so we'll see if you can get him on.
Yeah, I think after the holidays, he'll be one of the ones I reach out to. I'd love to have him on and talk to him, because
maybe send him an email about an hour before midnight on New Year's Eve, because he might be in a jovial mood at that point.
Yeah. Okay. I think I will.
You know what I'm getting at this.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Like I said, well, Professor McNally, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. It was extremely incredible talking with you, and your research lab. I'm very excited to see what comes out. What comes out of your labs next few weeks, I guess I'd say, and next few years. Honestly, I think organic chemistry is, for people that aren't as familiar, like it really is just a field that just keeps going, and it's never going away.
Yep.
And so there's still so much to learn, and it's very exciting. So yeah, look forward to it.
This has been awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed it. Happy to see more in the future.
Absolutely. I think, definitely I got to start bringing guests back on, actually. It'd be after a few publications. I think what I might start doing
about getting two people on at the same time, as not like a debate, but that type of thing. That could be fun. And
yeah, a few months ago, I actually had on Casey Ortiz and Noah Bartfield, who are both graduate students.
Oh, okay.
And that was very fun. We were just kind of shooting the shit. Like, we weren't even really talking some chemistry, but it was just fun. I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but I thought about maybe once. Maybe some sort of like journal club, but the problem is with that is like a journal club in chemistry might get contentious, because it's like
exactly. No one wants to be at all critical, right? Because I get it.
It's so political. It can be very political. And if I were like,
tell me about it, but take a risk, right?
Yeah, I know, right? If I were like a part of me is like, I don't like, if I were like a high level academic, like then I kind of have some credit and authority to talk about these things, but I'm only a third year grad student. So it's like, I don't really have, but then again, it's like, I don't know.
One thing I'll leave you with is, it actually might be the other way around in terms of how many risks that you can take. So you should go for it while, when you start moving up the ladder, it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this or that. But no, I don't know. But this is the thing. I'd tell anyone that this was a ton of fun to do. So I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah. And now I think about it, it's like, it doesn't have to be contentious. Maybe I could just talk about the chemistry, or like I can bring someone on to just talk about I don't know. I think it would be fun, actually. Because journal clubs are fun.
It's interesting to see the sort of story behind the story, and for papers and things like that. And, how did something emerge in a lab, sort of, and I know you get into that anyway, but, that's always really interesting for me, because, we all write papers in a certain way, and you're not getting all of these, in some ways, like the anecdotal part of it is super interesting for me.
It is, yeah.
I'm talked a lot about how things are sort of discovered today, and
serendipity.
Those things which we don't always like to admit in papers and stuff like that. I have no problem doing it, but that for me is like I always tell people, it's like, you want serendipity. I don't want my chemistry or whatever my lab produces to be limited to my brain. You want to get a reaction, you need to shake it to give up its secrets. Like, you need an IQ of 1,000 to come up with some of the things that a reaction will spit out, right? There's no way. And so, that for me is like, that's the interesting stuff for me. I love hearing about
Yeah.
those stories. So
I love the serendipity too, because I know the last thing I'll say is like, sometimes you're reading papers like we hypothesize this, and sometimes that actually might be true. And but it's like okay,
it was a lot messier at the very start, right?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. The last thing is score predictions for tomorrow. So I play fantasy. I play fantasy Premier League soccer, and I captained Salah this weekend. So I really need Salah to get me a few goals. I'm praying. I'm thinking 4-0 Liverpool.
I'm going to go. I think Salah's a good person to have as a captain to get you more points. Is that? I have to stop doing fantasy stuff, fantasy football. Because I just would look at the fantasy football thing and stop watching the game properly. But I think that's a good bet. I think it might be a little tighter. I think it might be. I can't see us not scoring a couple of goals, and I can see them sneaking one in off a whatever VAR crap penalty or something like that. So I'm gonna go 2-1 Liverpool and say this might be a little tight.
Okay. Yeah. Alrighty, you heard it here. You heard it here, folks. If you're listening to this, and we'll return. When I'm watching the game tomorrow. I'll be thinking about you and what's going to be happening. Hopefully it's a good day tomorrow. It is crazy how football can ruin your week, though. I will say.
That's another thing. It's like, that I will not
ruin your day.
Avoid me if we lose this game. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I will. Avoid. Yeah, but thank you again for listening to another episode, and we'll see you next time, folks. Alrighty.